Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority consists of about 250 employees. We've got 5 locations throughout the city, including this one. Our headquarters is at 1200 Penn, right by the bus station. And we've got a field facility, Brilliant Yard, right across the river and downstream about 200 or 300 yards, just this side of the Highland Park Bridge. And then a number of other facilities, some satellite field facilities throughout the city. We have about $150 million in annual revenue that comes in from the customers, from you, from me, from everyone who works for the city. And let me divide that up for you and tell you how that's spent. So about a third of that, about $50 million of that, goes right to Alpha. When you get your bill at home, not only does it have the line items for the water system and the sewer system, but also the Alka-San rate for treating sewage. So that's about a third. The next third, another $50 million, goes to pay for the debt that we've incurred over the last 40 years or so to upgrade and maintain the system. And that total debt, and I'll get back to this in a second, equals about $725 million of debt that we owe both to private bondholders and the state of Pennsylvania through a program that they have. And then the other third is everything else. So all of our operating expenses, the pizza you're eating tonight, the salaries that we pay these folks, the electricity, the chemicals, what have you. That's about $50 million. So that's how it chops up. And we've got a big responsibility here. Besides this water treatment plant, we have approximately 1,200 miles of sewer lines in the ground that we maintain, and 1,000 miles of water mains. Most utility assets, most water utility assets, are expected to last about 100 years. It depends. The stuff that's above ground that has more exposure to the elements won't last quite as long. But as a rule of thumb, we say it's about 100 years. We've got some lines in the system, the downtown parts of the system, some sewer lines that are 150 years old. So we're behind the curve in upgrading and maintaining the system. Just to give you some perspective about how much this is all going to cost to maintain that system, we have last year, let me back up. In 2013, we issued some debt so we could continue investing in the system. You'll see later tonight a big project that's going on here to upgrade the filter plant. That's about a $25 million investment. Number one investment that we make is to maintain this plant so that our customers can have clean, safe, reliable drinking water. But last year we spent or allocated about $50 million in capital. That's the most we've allocated probably ever in a single year. If we can maintain that level of spending for basically it will take us 400 years to replace the entire water and sewer system. Or another way to think of it is when the Pilgrims had landed, they had put in a water and sewer system in Plymouth, it would just now finish being replaced. So obviously that's not something we can do, but a lot of what we do, what you're going to hear from Bob, is figuring out how to prioritize with all these capital, all these conflicting demands for capital, how we prioritize the replacement of water lines, the replacement of sewer lines, the maintenance of this plant. And we look at condition, we look at how critical the customer is. So for example, if it serves a hospital, sorry guys, that gets a higher priority than you and I that own a house, but for obvious reasons. So that type of thing helps us determine what the priorities are. One of the reasons what we want to do that, we don't just want to spend money to spend money. We want to do it to make sure we can continue to provide reliable service to our customers. In the first 3 months of the year, we had 174 water main breaks. That's actually close to the average over 5 years. but with some big jumps in there in February. We had 20% more breaks in February than we normally do. And actually the cold part of the year is the part of the year where we get the most breaks, because the soil starts to freeze and then it contracts and it starts to crush the line. And the leak is discovered when the temperature changes and it starts to thaw and the soil lets go, and then the water can come out. So that's when a lot of our breaks are caused and occur. So the worst time of the year, when there was one day this year, you may remember, it's 9 below zero. Our crews are out there morning, noon, night, on the weekends, fixing water lines and sewer lines too, but mostly water lines. A couple of other things I wanted to touch on. One is, can't emphasize enough, I said earlier that this water treatment plant is our #1 priority, our asset for investment. And what a lot of people, we just take it for granted. We take it for granted that when we turn on the tap, that water will come out, and when we flush the toilet, stuff will go away. 150 years ago, people in cities died in the fall and the spring because of the diseases that were carried in the water. You didn't want to live in a city because it probably meant, that you weren't going to make it. Cholera, dysentery, all sorts of nice things. Then about 100 years ago or so, they started adding chlorine to the drinking water. And the chlorine controls all those things. It makes modern life possible. It's been called the greatest public health advancement of the last 1,000 years, the simple act of putting some bleach in your water. And there's more to it than that, obviously, but that's how important it is. It's no exaggeration to say that this facility here is what makes our modern life possible. It's what makes civilization possible. It's what makes living in a city possible. So we have an obligation to the public, our customers, to make sure that that asset is kept in as good working order as we can. Some other things that we're working on, you may have heard a lot about green infrastructure and the Alcosan project, where they have to spend several billion with a B to control wet weather overflows. And what that means in really simple terms is, let me give you a history of sewage disposal in the world. It used to be, you opened your window and you threw it out on the street. That was the first sewage disposal. Then, again, about 150 years ago, they started putting pipes in the ground to take it and just dump it directly into the river. At least it got it out of the streets. But those pipes took both sanitary sewage and the rainwater. And nowadays, when you build a new city, I'm from California, everything's new out there. We have separate systems. We have a sanitary system for the sewage, and we have a storm system for the rainwater. Not so much on the East Coast and the Midwest. Here, 3/4 of our system is the old type that takes both sewage and rainwater. It's called a combined system. And so what happens is, when it rains, the system gets overloaded. So the water has to go somewhere. It can either go into your street in your basement, which is not where we want it to go, or it can go into the river. And systems are purposely designed so that when they get too much water, that they go in the river. That's called an overflow, a wet weather overflow, or combined sewer overflow. It's purposely designed that way. Well, that's not the way we do it anymore, but that's the system we have. And so, in order to handle that, big investments need to be made to increase the capacity of Alcosan's plant, expand the size of the conveyance lines to move the flow to the plant. But there's another way to address that, and that is, let's keep the rainwater out in the first place. If the rainwater doesn't get in the pipe, then there's less likely to be an overflow. And a way to do that is the use of so-called green infrastructure, which can be, believe it or not, that thing right there in the driveway is, in a few more weeks, is going to be a beautiful rain garden. That was just lawn, and we planted a garden there, and you'll notice it's concave. And during a typical rainstorm that falls in Pittsburgh, all the water that runs off from the driveways here will be managed by that little rain garden. And so that water will no longer go into the combined sewer or into the river. So what we want to do is, to the extent possible, do those things throughout the city. Rain gardens, swales, which is like a little hill. The tree boxes that you see. Put a big reservoir under the tree, let that hold the water. Porous pavement. I think James is going to talk later, a little bit later about that. He's got a sample of it. But instead of hard packed concrete for a parking lot, put porous pavement in so the water can percolate into the groundwater basin. What we're doing, and we're leading an effort, is to take a look at that first. Let's reduce flows into the system first, and then let's take a look at how big the system needs to be. And with that, we hope to be able to decrease the size of the needed expansions to the Alcosan system. Plus, the green is, gets you beautiful gardens. It increases the shade in the neighborhood. It increases property values. So it's a good thing all around. I could go on and on and on about things we're doing. I'm very proud of the 250 men and women who work here. We're a complete full-service operation. The field work, customer service, engineering, accounting, whatever it is I do, we do all of that in our operation.
Hi, I'm Joey Tolbert. I'm the Interim Finance Director for the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here tonight to talk to you about the Finance Department. But I'm also thankful to see that you guys already had something to eat, because you never want the finance guy to talk before people have already ate, because then everybody's in a hurry. So it's such a dry topic on finance that everybody is waiting to hear with bated breath, right, Melissa, on this. But we're going to give you a quick overview of what we do in the Finance Department for the authority. One of the things we do in the authority is the fact is we have a very basic principle that we follow, and it's called the RAT principle. And that RAT is an acronym for relevant, accurate, and timely information. Because what we do is we provide financial information to the executive director, to the board of the authority, and to our bond investors, but more importantly to you as the ratepayers. If we don't provide relevant, accurate, and timely financial data, it's difficult for management to make the right decisions going forward on what course of action to take, whether it would be from an operational point of view or a capital funding point of view. So that's our overriding principle that we use, and we try to abide by it in all cases. So the fact that we're providing unbiased, direct financial data. You can go to the next slide there. The major functions of our department in the Finance Department is obviously the preparation of financial statements. We prepare financial statements on a monthly basis, but also for our annual audit. We're also directly involved in the operating budget, for debt management, the annual audit, as I mentioned, payroll, and procurement. As Mr. Good mentioned, we have 250 employees, 250 people like us every other Thursday in the authority, so all across the board. The next one, Melissa. On our financial statements, the thing is the fact that we prepare our financial statements on a monthly basis. What we do is the fact that we provide financial information to the board as well as to the executive director. We break it down by department because we do a budget variance analysis. It's on a monthly basis, so the fact that we can look at trends throughout the year. And each respected department manager gets a monthly financial statement, so the fact that they can do their own analysis of their variances. One of the things that we've instituted from our chief operating officer this year is the fact that we're reaching out to each individual department. If there is a budget variance that is greater than 15% or it's over $100,000, we're asking them for a direct reference to that variance and why it is. If it's a positive or a negative variance, so the fact that we can understand what's going on in the business versus the fact of waiting to the end of the year or during the annual budget process, so the fact to try to remember what happened in April. Now, each one of the departments is responsible for their individual budgets, and in those budgets we'll talk about in more detail as we move forward. And in the operating budget, one of the things that we try to do is the fact we like to take a bottom-up point of view to the budget. And what we mean from a bottom-up is we reach out to the individual departmental managers and they involve their employees. It goes from the bottom employees all the way up to management. Versus the approach, if we took a top-down budget approach, there's no ownership in the field. For example, here at the water plant, if we prepared the budget for the water plant from a top-down point of view, we more than likely would leave something out. And Mr. DeRay here, the plant manager, wouldn't be real happy if I forgot the budget, like for chlorine, as Mr. Good referenced, that is put into our water. Whereas if the budget comes from the departmental managers and they've involved their employees, they've identified items that they need for normal operations and also for capital expenditures from an operating point of view. If they need vehicles, or if they need computers, or if they need some technological advancement or a major repair. Because like here at the water plant, there's always an item that it seems like that's always up for a repair, whether it be a pump, a lime slaker, or anything like that. Now, the thing is also, as I mentioned on the monthly variance analysis, that is where we have direct interaction on a monthly basis with each one of the departmental managers, so the fact that we can review their financial performance. On debt management in our department, one of the critical things for debt is, as Mr. Good alluded to, we issued capital debt. We have debt on the books of over $700 million, whether it be through bond debt or through Pinvest loans for capital improvements through the authority. We will also work hand in hand with the engineering department, and Mr. Christian's here, and he will give an update on our capital improvement plan. We work hand in hand with engineering to see what the cash flow needs are going to be for our future capital improvement program, and try to match that with a debt profile, so the fact that we can go out to the debt market and take advantage of the best interest rates possible for the authority and try to match the cash flow projections that are needed by the capital improvement program with our capital funding. One of the things that obviously we have to do on an annual basis is we have to make principal and interest payments on all of our debt in a timely manner, because the authority is a component unit of the overall city government, but we do have an independent debt rating. Our rating is currently A2 by Moody's and S&P. We have an independent financial advisor, and we work with them and bond counsel in order to try to maximize our debt position so we can minimize our annual payments through interest. For example, if there was an opportunity to do a refunding, if we had a bond that was outstanding that was paying a 6% interest rate and we could take advantage of a 3% market, think of it as refinancing your own home. If you had a chance to lower your mortgage, you would do the same thing. One of the requirements of our bond indentures is the fact that we have 120% of annual debt service coverage. We have to cover our annual debt service payments through operations and cash by 120% of that annual debt requirement. Currently in 2014, in our recent audit, the thing is we were able to obtain a 180% debt service coverage ratio, so that's a direct compliment to every departmental manager in controlling their budget, as well as being able to identify revenue sources that we can increase revenues for the authority. In the last 2 years, we've been very fortunate in the fact in our operating side of our budget, we've actually, in our actual results for the year, have been within 1% of the budgeted amount. So we've done a very good job in a departmental by departmental basis of controlling operating expenses. So that helps the authority maintain our debt rating, maintain our cash reserves, and to reach that type of annual debt service coverage. Next slide, please. The annual audit. This is our opportunity where an outside auditor comes in and audits the books. This is like in any other company, you know, our fiscal year runs on a calendar year basis, and on the calendar year, our annual auditors, they come in, they like to visit us in March, and our audit has to be done by April 30th because we are a component unit of the city of Pittsburgh. One of the things that we're very proud of is the fact that our annual audit is non-qualified, and our opinion of our auditors is that our financial statements fairly represent and present the financial condition of the authority. And just like in a corporation, Mr. Good and myself, we both have to sign off on the relevance and the accuracy of the financial information. We have to follow the same rules as corporate America there. The key element for the annual audit is also for debt holders, because of the fact that anybody that is an investor in the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority debt likes to look at the annual audit to see what our performance is. We're also required to make annual filings with a service that we use called DAC. DAC actually posts for investors our financial results, and we're required to do that within 90 days of the receipt of the audit. If that requirement isn't met, we're subject to fines. Next slide. The payroll function. As Mr. Good stated, we have approximately 250 employees throughout the authority. We're on a bi-weekly payroll cycle. The thing is the fact that we take care of the payroll function within the finance department, and I assure you, when the paychecks are okay, you never hear a word from the employees. But if there's a nickel wrong, we hear about it, whether it's pro or con. And I mean, this takes care of leave requests. We have multiple union environments. We have white collar, we have blue collar unions. I mean, we have more rates and wage classes and classes of jobs than we can even list. I'd say we have at least 100 classes across all functions that we have. So payroll is always a fun function. Next slide. And then we also handle procurement. On procurement, obviously the thing is procurement is based on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania regulations. We have to follow all the regulations for procurement. Our department managers sometimes like to yell at our procurement manager because of the fact of the time constraints, because we have to advertise, and also the bid requirements. And our board also likes to see anytime we go out for a competitive bid, they want to know how many firms actually picked up the RFP and how many responses that we got. What they're doing there is they're measuring the number of firms that are responding versus the firms that picked up the actual solicitation, because the goal is the more competition we have, the better rates that we're going to get for the authority. So competitive bidding is very useful for us when we're looking at professional services and materials. The type of solicitation is dictated in various forms. Whether we go out for an RFP, or if we can use co-stars, or the fact we go out for an IFB on a requirement for that. Any type of expenditure that exceeds the executive director's limitations of $19,500 for approval requires board approval, and we have to go out for competitive bid. If it's over $10,000, we can get 3 quotes and comply with the procurement rules of the Commonwealth.
Hi everybody, my name is Bob Christian. I'm the Director of Engineering at the Authority. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the Engineering Department and the Capital Improvement Program, or CIP program. Challenges, Mr. Good hit upon this quite a bit. Aging infrastructure. I'd like to point out this is not a problem specific to Pittsburgh. Any older city, many cities across the United States have aging infrastructure issues. Our age of pipe average is about 80 years old. As Jim alluded to, we're at about 400-year replacement cycle right now. Not sustainable. It's something that we're looking into. It's a challenge of the authority, but also a challenge of every utility and city across the United States. Aging infrastructure drives our capital program. It's one of the drivers for it. Increasing regulations is one of our challenges. As we go along, regulations become more stringent. EPA puts out guidelines, states adopt those guidelines and enforce those guidelines over a time period. So that is something that also drives our capital improvement program. Decreasing population, it's kind of hard to argue that in this day. It seems like there's so much development within the city right now. However, if you look back, our water plant is permitted about 100 million gallons per day. We produce somewhere in the 70s million gallons per day, so we're not running at full capacity anymore. Therefore, decreased population, which is a decrease in revenue, as rates are what we use to run the authority. A study that was done not too long ago, a 40-year planning study, estimated $2.6 billion was necessary to invest in the system to bring it current and to replace and get back on a regular replacement schedule. So just to give you an order of magnitude of the dollars we're talking about, but again, it's a very common problem. Okay, just want to give an idea of what kind of infrastructure, what quantities we have. We have about 930 miles of water line, about 1,200 miles of sewer line, more than 25,000 valves, hydrants more than 7,300, storage facilities, 5 reservoirs, 11 tanks, sewage pump stations 4, over 30,000 catch basins, and 29,000 manholes. A couple things I'd like to point out from this slide. There's only one main treatment plant for the city, and Millvale. We also operate Millvale. That's pretty good planning way back when, 100 plus years ago, when the city was laid out and where this plant was designed to feed the city. One major treatment plant. That's good planning. And also sewage pump stations. There's only 4. Okay, so that means that the original planners took advantage of gravity, took advantage of all our contours and our hills within the city. And basically, if you eliminate pumps, you use gravity, you save on electric costs. One of your 3 biggest costs with the utilities is electricity. Now, don't get too scared with the slides. It is more for me to talk from rather. Our engineering department right now, we currently have about 84 projects moving through the department in some form, in some phase. Okay, some are completed, a lot are in construction, some are just beginning. We have about a staff of about 24 people, so I'm very proud of our staff and the amount of work that we actually do manage going through there. So about 36 projects are in construction, 4 are just beginning, and 23 are in closeout. Now, Joey's already mentioned funding sources. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. 44 of our projects are funded from bonds, and Mr. Tolbert talked about bonds. Other forms of funding, developer funding. So especially with all the development going on right now, 24 of our projects are developer-funded projects. I'd like to mention sewer separation. When a developer comes in and they renovate the area, most of our system right now is a combined system where you have stormwater and you have sewage in one pipe that's being conveyed to Alcosan. When we go into an area and we look to relay a sewer, we have to separate the sewer. So instead of one pipe, you're going to have 2. You're going to have a stormwater pipe and you're going to have a sewage pipe. Now down the street, they combine back into a combined system, but over time, a long period of time, with this approach, the entire system will be separated. And economically, you can't just rip into the street and separate everything at once. So that's the approach the authority takes when doing these projects. And as development occurs, infrastructure is renewed. Now, wanted to point out the distribution of some of our projects, kind of the measle chart at the end over the city map in Millvale, well spread out throughout the city. Criteria, Jim mentioned criteria. Age of pipe is a huge indicator of what's going to be replaced. It really drives the distribution system, the treated water system replacement. Age of pipe, main breaks, location, and criticality, who it's actually serving. Sewers, and I've got a slide a little bit later in this presentation, and it'll show you some criticality measurement, if you will. But sewers are also age and location, but also volume. Is this a particular area that's having problems? We'll take a look at, because a lot of areas are, there's basement backup issues within the city that we look to deal with, so that does drive a lot of our sewer projects as well. So our capital improvement program is a 5-year program. And again, please don't pay too much attention to the graphs. It's more for me to talk from. So the first graph's from 2014 to 2020. So late 2013, we got a new bond. 2014, we started ramping up our construction schedule. All right, so we were spending about $20 million a year. And as Jim mentioned, we're about $50 million a year right now. $50 million a year is still hundreds of years of replacing the system. So again, we need to look to ramp up, but $50 million is more than we've ever done before. give you an idea of the overall magnitude, by the end of 2019, we're about $430 million invested back into the system. So I want to give you the feeling that we are looking at, very proactively looking at bringing the system up to standards. Also, what comes into play is alternate funding, grant programs we've been taking a look at. How can we bring the system into, say, a 100-year replacement where we look for the end of life of a pipe? And once again, these are all problems that utilities have to deal with. As far as where the money goes, the first category there is a dark blue. That is our sewer investment. You may notice that towards 2020, the investment gets larger. We have a consent order that both the PWSA and the city are required to address. And that is, the end of that is about 2026. So there's a lot of money funding towards the end of that to address those issues. What was mentioned already was our filter rehab project. We have 18 rapid sand filters here at this facility, which you all see a little later. They are being rehabilitated. A large project moving through here now. It's a 36-month project, and that is the purple moving through. That's really going to drive a good bit of our capital spending right now. The orange is pump systems, and light blue is distribution systems. So I want to show that there is a variable amount of spending and how the dollars do get back out into our system. So what's new at the PWSA? Our engineering team itself, we're looking at restructuring to some degree. We're looking at using a team approach rather than just a small group of people managing a project from conception to implementation and end of construction. Rather than having that, we're looking at different handoffs. We're looking at people involved directly in planning, people involved in design, and people involved in construction, and a handoff through each phase. In doing so, you have more eyes on projects, you have more people involved, more expertise, and the idea is you're going to get a better product more efficiently at the end of the day. Sustainability, green infrastructure, James Stitt will talk more about that. We have 5 positions within the engineering group dedicated to sustainability and green infrastructure. One open position right now, energy manager, which we're looking to fill, but it's a major commitment into a sustainable approach to project execution. eBuilder implementation. eBuilder is a project management tool. So I mentioned capital funding and limited. We need to be as efficient as possible with managing our projects, and tools like eBuilder allow us to do that. So an investment in something like that to better maximize our spending is also things that we look at. CMMS is Computer Maintenance Management System. So it's a very modern way to run a utility. It's for a tool for a utility. Basically, it records your infrastructure and the amount of money you're spending and the amount of repairs that you're spending towards specific infrastructure. It allows you to make decisions. Should we be repairing this, or should we actually let it go and just plan on replacing it in the future? It allows us to better determine where our capital investment should go. Rather new field of engineering spinning off from this, reliability engineering. It's predictive maintenance, it's risk analysis. It's actually a really exciting field, and it's something that we're moving towards, and it's really going to make us a well-modern utility. And annual contracts. It was mentioned, the board looks at our bidding, who's bidding, that we're doing it competitively. We want to encourage competition, encourage the best price, but not only that, but we want to make sure that service is provided. A lot of contracts recently, we started breaking up into multiple contractors doing the same work. Allows our response times to be better, encourages competition among those contractors, and we're trying this approach and believe we're going to get a good result from it. I'm not going to talk too much about green infrastructure as James is here, but wanted to point out from this slide some of our partners and the areas of projects throughout the city. Three Rivers Wet Weather, Economic Development South, Alcosan, the various universities throughout the city, and the city itself. But this is something that's a big topic, it's moving forward, and it's definitely an approach to solving some of our problems. I will talk about one project with green infrastructure, and I hope not to steal James' thunder too much. Maryland Avenue, Shady Side area. So we looked at basically the boxed area in the middle picture there. And part of the problem is no matter what we do, we can renew the sewers, we can make the sewers larger. The problem is there's too much water falling too fast in that specific area that you can't get out of that area without a major investment to go all the way to the river. So what do you do to solve this problem? And one tool for doing that is green infrastructure, which James will talk about. And just to summarize some of our projects, I mentioned our filter rehab project. We have a project at our Brecken pump station with valve replacement. We have a SCADA project, the Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition System. It's basically remote control, remote data access of our various facilities and more updated control and data logging. Allows us to make better decisions and more of a modern approach to it. Clearwell upgrade. The Clearwell is right here in Aspinwall at this plant. It's very old, and it's something that we're looking to address in the next 5 years. We just finished a transmission main rehab on our 60-inch line. One good mention about this is what we used was trenchless technology. So rather than digging up a whole sewer, going in and replacing it, what we do is look at lining it, or some kind of lining or bag or coating. It basically renews the sewer without having to excavate the entire pipe. It's much more cost effective, you get a lot of life out of it, and again, trying to stretch the capital dollars. The rest of the projects, various pump station projects, water line projects. Let's see if you can hit the sewer improvement, the green infrastructure projects. I mentioned some of our consent order, sewer, wastewater spending was later in our program. That's our CSO Phase 1 project. And joint projects. Another thing that we do for extending the funding as much as possible, especially in the last years, we're looking at joint ventures. If the city, if another utility is going into a street and replacing their infrastructure, we'd like to get in on that with them and share some of the work with them. Basically, if we're both in the same street at the same time, we could share some of the cost of repaving and redoing the street. So again, we're spreading the dollars as far as we can. And I thank you.
Okay, so my name is James Stitt. I'm the Sustainability Manager for the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority. Part of my job involves just about everything that we do, because in some way, shape, or form, I get usually pulled into something every day that's new and different. Because what we're trying to do is incorporate this idea of sustainability throughout our entire system, right? We want to look at everything we do from a perspective of, is it cost effective? Is it efficient? Is it looking for the best interest of the people and the planet that we have to deal with, as well as being economically sound and feasible? A large part of my job is involving stormwater management and green infrastructure, something that Jim talked about a little bit earlier, and you heard about the consent orders and the consent decrees that Alcosan has, the consent orders that municipalities have, basically demanding and requiring us to remove those overflows and reduce them from happening and contaminating our rivers. As they said, what happens on a normal dry day, that sanitary sewage that leaves your house drops down into your drain pipes, into the sewage pipes, flows along, and then makes its way to the treatment facility downstream. When we get heavy rains, that water collects on the rooftops, the roadways, the sidewalks, and then flows into the drains and the catch basins along there. And if it's a heavy enough storm, it falls into that same pipe and then will overflow into the river because this pipe on its way to this treatment facility can no longer has any more capacity to carry any more water. That water has to go somewhere, and if this opening wasn't here at the river mouth, then this pipe would back up and that water would come back up into your basements or into your drains. So, problem with that, we end up with contaminated rivers that have E. coli and other bacterial pathogens in them. About 70 days out of the year, we will have this problem. As little as 1/10 of an inch of rain can cause a particular outfall to activate and dump sewage into the rivers. You'll notice there's not a whole lot of sewage mixed with that stormwater, but the problem is it's kind of like the old vintner. If you're a winemaker, if you have a barrel of vinegar and a barrel of wine, you take 1 drop of wine and put it in the vinegar, it's still vinegar. But if you take 1 drop of vinegar and put it in the wine, you now have a barrel of vinegar. Same thing with the sewage. If you take 1 drop of sanitary sewage, mix it with that rainwater, it's now all sanitary sewage, right? It's all raw sewage. It's been contaminated. So our job is to try and treat this, right? Because what it causes is things like this, flooding, basement backups occur. This here is an outfall that's activating. That water is probably due to a rainfall earlier that day or occurring at that moment. And this large gate will open up and just flow right out to the river. And then we end up with, older pictures like this is how things were originally constructed. We've moved ahead of that, but still, when we get those heavy rains, we're still doing the same kind of thing, contaminating our waterways, if you would. One of the things we want to try to do is keep that water from getting into the pipes in the first place, right? That stormwater falls from the sky, it hits the ground, rolls across the pavement and the asphalt, and ends up into a sewer. We want to prevent it from getting to that sewer in the first place. So how do we do that? Rooftops, we can do things like rooftop gardens and green roofs. We can do things in your yards like rain gardens, that kind of stuff. The green infrastructure helps us keep the rainwater where it falls. This is a whole new idea in stormwater management. History up until this time, the last decade or so, was stormwater is bad. Bad for my building, bad for my site. When it falls from the sky and lands on the ground, I want to get it in a pipe and take it away as quickly as possible. Problem with that is, same lesson we learned with trash and recycling 25 years ago, when you throw something away, there is no away, right? It doesn't go away, it goes somewhere else, somebody else has to contend with it and deal with it. Same thing with that sewage and that stormwater. It doesn't go into the pipe and then go away, it goes somewhere else, somebody has to deal with it. PWSA or Alcosan, or when we can't handle the capacity, the rivers get to deal with it. This is a new approach, change the whole paradigm. We're going to deal with that water before it gets into the pipe. We're not going to take it away. We're going to figure out a way to handle it on site. So green infrastructure is going to help us do that in many different ways. Infiltration versus conveyance is the key to this. We want to infiltrate that water back into the ground and keep it in the soils where it falls, instead of putting it in a pipe and conveying it somewhere else. One example here is a rain garden. This is something that you'll see a lot of residential use for it. And just like the rain garden we have out here, this was just planted last fall, so it's only now just coming into maturity and getting the plants to start to flower. It's landscaping, but it's also a stormwater management asset. It works and it's engineered to work just like any other stormwater management facility. There is a purpose to the way this is designed, with the shallow depths and the runnels and the way the plants are planted to soak up the water and use that water when it gets filled up. These are some examples of rain gardens that are in the local area. This one here not only captures water from this house, but you'll see this curb cut here that takes water from the street and into that rain garden as well. And this is another one here. That one on that side is over in Regent Square, right in front of Frick Park on Braddock Avenue. Bioswales are similar to a rain garden. It's sort of like a long linear rain garden. This one here you can see taking water from the sidewalk as well as the street. During a rainstorm, this channel fills up with water. After it rains, all of these plants soak up that water, drink it up, evapotranspirate it back into the atmosphere. What they don't drink up gets soaked into the soil and absorbed back into the ground below. This is an example of a bioswale down in Yeah, down in with
Greenfield.
Greenfield, but I'm trying to think of what's the
Across the straw.
no, Big Joe's or Big Jack's or
Big
Big
Jim's.
Jim's, right? Big Jim's. Everybody knows where Big Jim's is. This is across the street from that. This is what it looked like before. Then they came in. This is porous asphalt here. This is or porous concrete. It's rather than pouring the concrete with real fine aggregates in it and compacting it fully smooth, it's coarser aggregates that are less compacted, and they sort of act like not a sponge, but more like an open pore mesh that allows water to filter through, and then the plants on the other side here, the trees as well. This is porous pavement. You can see here during the rainstorm, this side is the porous side, this side is the regular normal asphalt that's been rolled completely flat. This side the water soaks in and through, this side the water can't go anywhere, it has to run off and find somewhere else to go. This is a rain barrel that a lot of homes, you'll see them connected up to the downspouts and the gutters on the corner of the home. They're great, they capture a lot of roof water runoff. Key to the rain barrels though is what's going to happen to this thing after a couple of rains. It's going to fill up, right? So you got to drain it, you got to use that water, remember that it's there. If you hear on the weather report that there's a rainstorm coming, go check your rain barrel if you have one, make sure that it's empty or at least drained down so that you have the capacity so that that water doesn't actually divert back to the gutters and the sewer pipes. Green roof I mentioned earlier. This is another way to capture rainwater on the building and by using soil media, and a lot of this media is a very lightweight planting soil. It's not necessarily like heavy clumps of dirt that you're putting up there. It's more like like if you remember the vermiculite and some of those other mediums. It's like holds a lot of water. You can get a wide variety of plants, grasses, and other things. This was a part of the David Lawrence Convention Center. This was an all smooth concrete patio that they really didn't have any plans for, weren't going to do anything with. Came up with a design for a green roof with this pattern on it, and now this is a prime spot for receptions, parties, and a lot of events whenever they have conferences there. They get a great deal of use out of that space. Some other things are trees, tree boxes. Trees are like sort of like we call them the stormwater rock stars, because the bigger the tree gets, the more it drinks, right? The more its roots spread out, the more water it can suck up. New York City and some other cities have standardized tree pits that have an inlet here and an outlet here. Water goes in, falls in. If it gets filled up too full, then it just overflows right back out to the street and continues on its way. These are another examples here of a similar type idea. And you can see how these are incorporated into the normal pedestrian pathways and the sidewalks and the streetscape. Doesn't really change much, but it does improve the look and the feel of this street. To be much more comfortable and happy walking down that street than just something that was completely covered with all asphalt and pavement. This is our goal at Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority. I mentioned we have those 70 days approximately every year that we can't, technically shouldn't be, in having contact with the rivers and the waterways. Our goal is to eliminate that and make it so that we can come in contact, we can have access to our rivers and waterways, all three rivers, 365 days a year. We've seen a lot more increased activity along our waterways. I don't know if any of you are kayakers or boaters. Allegheny County has the largest inland boat registration of any inland port. So other than the coastal areas along the oceans on each side of the coast, we have more boats here than any other city in the country. We also have a lot more, you see a lot more people with kayaks. We had the rubber duck a couple of summers ago that brought people out in droves. The buildings in the city now, everybody's sort of turning to face the rivers, whereas in the past, we had our backs to the rivers. Nobody wanted to do anything with the rivers. They were dirty, they were disgusting, nobody wanted to deal with them. Well, we've changed all that. We've had the Bassmasters competition here a couple of years running now. A lot more aquatic ecosystem restoration going on, and we want to keep it that way and make it even better. So that's sort of our goal with the green infrastructure program that we have. And our approach is to do the green stuff first so that we can eliminate that water, then we don't have to build so many pipes and so much gray infrastructure, because the green stuff's on the surface where we can see it and enjoy it and get the other benefits out of it. Other benefits like improved air quality, improved neighborhood impression, economic development. People want to live and build where there's green space and parks and waterfront access. So we're hoping to encourage a lot more of that. I did bring a sample here of the porous concrete. If you take a look at this here, this is that porous concrete that we saw in the screen there that the water soaks through. It looks a little funky, looks more like kind of like a sponge, so you can see there's some pores in it. If I turn this pump on, as the water hits the top of it, you'll note that it doesn't pool and run off the sides, and you're welcome to come up and take a look at this when you get a chance. It hits the surface, finds its way down through all these little open pores, and then will work its way out to the bottom. Usually the way this is set up is there's a bed of gravel and some other material underneath that will increase even more water capacity below it and support the stone. It's not probably appropriate for roadways, but in parking areas like we saw in that picture there, it's a fantastic application. So with that, I will turn it over to Gina to talk to you a little bit more about water quality and what goes on here at the plant, and then we'll be happy to answer some more questions.
Hi everyone, my name is Gina Cyprich. I'm the Environmental Compliance Manager here for the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority. I'm going to talk to you today about some water quality parameters that we're testing for, and so that you get to know your H2O from the source to the tap. So where does the Pittsburgh water supply come from? Well, we get our water from the Allegheny River. And so the Allegheny River is 325 miles long. It actually starts up in New York State, and it goes through PA and then back to New York and then finally to PA again. And as we know, it ends at the point where it merges with the Monongahela River to form the Ohio River. The Army Corps of Engineers estimates that 1.2 billion gallons of water passes our intake every day. So that just goes to speak to how water rich our region really is. We have an allocation permit, as Bob mentioned, that we can withdraw or take out 100 million gallons a day from the river. But so we have to manage the stormwater runoff and things like that so that we can have good quality water coming into the system. But that's just showing some areas of our country are facing water droughts, but we just have such a good supply that we want to keep it sustainable. You can do the next one. So, but what really does affect your drinking water? We'll go and we'll talk a little bit about that. So some causes of your drinking water. But when we're saying water quality, what are we really talking about? Well, when we use that term water quality, we're describing the health of that body of water via basic contaminants, either chemical, biological, or physical characteristics of that body of water. And there are two types of pollution that could affect this body of water. And right now we're talking primarily with the source, the raw water, the river water. You could have point source contamination, and it's kind of, I had it explained to me, if you can point it and see where it's coming from a pipe, it's something that you can identify or trace. Non-point source pollutions are something that can't be traced, like agricultural runoff or street runoff, those types of pollutions. And the next slides will show some examples of that. You can hit it again. So here we have urban sewage runoff, like James talked about CSO. So that's a combination of stormwater and sewage, and sometimes just stormwater running into the riverways. We have acid mine drainage. This area was mined heavily. In some areas, the rivers are affected by acid mine drainage. We see oil spills. Sometimes we'll get oil sheens on our rivers, and then runoff. And then in the winter time, a lot of people don't maybe think about this, but we call it the big melt. We notice turbidity levels in the rivers increasing because of all that. The salt that they're using on the roadways gets flushed, and it goes into our rivers. So that's another source of contamination that we can see happening within the rivers. You can go to the next slide. So what can a utility do to make sure that they're being protected against all the contamination or the threats that could potentially contaminate our rivers? Well, then we would implement what's called a source water protection plan. The PWSA has a source water protection plan. We implemented it in 2010, so we're coming up on our 5-year anniversary. And what does a source water protection plan do? Well, you can see all the list of good things that it does, but primarily it just is keeping an eye on the potential polluters upstream from a utility, making sure that the public health is always being maintained and that it's protecting main waterways and tributaries. And in fact, there are ordinances in place to help a water utility go to a potential polluter if they are deemed to be polluting, to help them stop that from happening so that our source is better protected. Another way that PWSA implements this source water protection plan is, you can next slide, is by belonging to some source water protection organizations. We belong to the River Alert Information Network, and what that does, it has monitoring stations, early warning spill detection networks along the Allegheny, Youghiogheny, Mon rivers, and that just monitors water quality data in real time. Primarily, we're looking at conductivity, pH, and temperature. We also are members of ORSANCO, Ohio River Valley Sanitation Commission, and they have an organic detection system at the headwaters of the Ohio and then all along the Ohio River. And they're looking for volatile organic compounds or substances that are derived from gasoline products, oil products, things like this. And they also they have a team of people, experts, that help EPA and DEP recommend water quality standards for your NPDES permits, industrial waste discharge permits, and things like this. So we are proud to be members of those organizations. And this is an example of one of the rain monitors. When you go on the tour, you'll see in the lab of the rain monitor we have over by the fish tanks. And again, we're checking for conductivity, pH, and temperature. Some other expanded source water panels can also test for total suspended solids, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, ammonia, things like this. So these are good things to know what you're bringing into your plant, so you know how much treatment chemicals to use so that you can mitigate any potential risks to the system. You can go ahead. So as the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, we use a multi-barrier approach in making sure that we're providing safe drinking water. As mentioned, we have our source water protection plan. When you tour this, this is a conventional filtration plant, and we employ clarification, which involves coagulation, flocculation, and sedimentation. And you'll actually be able to see that in action when you walk through the plant. We also have conventional filtration, which is that rapid sand filter, those rapid dual media filters that Bob was talking about earlier. Again, you'll be able to see those. And disinfection is something that we're using. We use sodium hypochlorite or bleach, chlorine, as our primary disinfection. We also make sure that disinfection is carried throughout the distribution system, so that we're maintaining safe residuals out there. And then we also have various storage facilities for our water. So what's driving this? Not only do we want to make sure that we're putting out the highest quality water possible and the safest, but we also are under regulations to do so. As you can imagine, tap water is actually more regulated than bottled water that you are drinking. Well, this bottled water comes from our membrane plant, so it's safe. So the EPA does federal regulations that we have to follow, and the state DEP, they'll enforce those regulations. And then here we have the Allegheny County Health Department that will inspect the facilities. So you can see we have a wide range of regulations that we need to follow and agencies that we need to comply with. So these are various amounts of water tests that we do on an annual, daily, monthly basis. Some of these we will talk about a little bit more in detail. Some of them are for on the drinking water side of things. Some of them are for non-potable source water or wastewater that we would conduct in-house or send to a contract lab. Good. So some of the ones that we'll talk about, temperature. We talked temperature effects on how much oxygen or what the water can hold. So we always get calls in the winter that people have cloudy water when they're turning their tap on and they get a glass of water. And that cloudiness is a direct impact on the temperature. The temperature variations from the water being pulled into the main to the warmth of the inside of your home. So we tell them that that's actually just oxygen, and if you just set it on your counter, those bubbles will dissipate and the water should be clear. So temperature is a parameter we're looking at. pH, of course, water is all about pH. So we use pH as a driver for us, not only at the front end of the plant, because we need the right pH to have that coagulation happening, but also on the distribution system. As mentioned numerous times, we have an old infrastructure, and some of those lines are made of lead, and we don't want that lead to leach off of those pipes, so we're under a corrosion control permit, so we have to maintain a strict pH. We actually maintain a pH around 8.2 to make sure that that lead isn't being leached off those pipes. So, and then, of course, we also test for microorganisms at the front end of the plant as an indicator organism for the health of the river, but then also for out in the distribution system to make sure that there's no infiltration into your drinking water lines and that we have adequate disinfection. So we're checking for things like E. coli and then Cryptosporidium and Giardia. Cryptosporidium and Giardia, they're pretty robust protozoa. Cryptosporidium isn't something that can be deactivated or killed using chlorine, so we test vigorously for this on the long-term LT2 rule, long-term surface water enhancement rule. And we also, that's another reason for upgrading our filters, to, again, to make sure that we're removing any potential contamination. Also, turbidity. The turbidity is a measurement of particles in the water, and or the cloudiness that is in the water. And again, throughout the entire process of the treatment, we are checking for turbidity, total suspended solids, and things like this, because we want to make sure that we're removing as much as we can at the front of the plant so we don't clog up our filters and we can sustain more life out of our filters. Go ahead. And then heavy metals. We have a lot of metals in the rivers because of industrial activity. So we check for things like iron and manganese, lead and copper out in the distribution system. So all these things also play a role in what we're looking at, again, to make sure that we're providing high quality water. Yeah, so my last slide. All of this testing we do equals quality drinking water for you at the tap. So we care about what's coming, we're drawing into the plant. We care about how the water is moving through the plant, and we definitely care about what we're drinking. So that's why we're in business, to provide the safest, highest quality water.